when somebody gets a job at Ritz-Carlton, they put that brown uniform on, and the first thing they say is, "We're ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen." You have to go there, and there's a code as to how you behave, right? But when you bring people into a business, often we haven't got the systems and the processes to tell people how they should behave. And when they start acting how they would naturally act, we act disappointed. My mum didn't really work. She worked behind the bar and she worked in Butlins for a while, like slightly before I was born. And my real father, I didn't know, but my stepfather, he was a coal miner. His first job was a coal miner. And a funny story about that. He um, he moved from England to Scotland, and his name was Jimmy Moffat, James Anderson Moffat. They used to call him Jimmy, and he was the angry little Scotchman, like proper archetype. He would, my grandmother used to say that he would pick a fight in an empty house. He
Right.
was so angry. Anyway, when he left Scotland in 1974 to come to England, he'd sold somebody a ton of coal, and he never delivered the coal. And the guy was a copper. So Jimmy
Jeez.
got done for it. That was his character. He got done for it. And he went to Berlini prison in Scotland. I've never been to Berlini prison, but apparently it's some not nice prison, which I remember it was the Christmas of 74. It was delightful because he was a nasty piece of work, even though
Right.
he was a small, angry little man. But yeah, so coal miner, and my mother worked in Butlins for a while, did a few bar jobs, but didn't really work. So yeah, that was going up. And then Jimmy had about 50 jobs between then and the rest of his time. He was a ragman after that most of his life.
What was your real father like?
My real father, I only met him twice, and his name was Lloyd Terrelong. My mum came down from Scotland to England in 1968, had sex for the first time, and then went back to Scotland with me in her stomach. And next thing you know, on the
Jeez.
30th of April 1969, I was born. I was the only black kid in the village. So,
Yeah.
and racism was quite a big thing back then. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But I didn't really know my real father. I remember, I've had some decent success in my life. And so when I came out of the army, I went to go and find him. I was a financial advisor, actually. God said to come out of the army. I went to find him, and I found him in Nottingham. And he was a bit of a nobody. There was nothing there. It was like, stick your hand in a bucket of water, pull it out. Where's the gap? That was it. There was nothing really there.
Yeah. And you know the reason that I asked that because I was trying to get to the mixed race sort of,
Yeah.
thing because I think that was from when we had our chat the other day. I think that was one of the things that you talked about that was probably quite challenging for you as a kid, wasn't it? Particularly I mean, we're talking what early 70s then,
Yeah, it was.
when you were in school in Scotland, I guess. And so that must have been unusual.
Well, my first real memories of school were I remember going to St Mary's School. I was 5 years old, and that racism was rife. I mean, you had programs on the television like Love Thy Neighbor, where they'd call somebody like Nignog or Sambo or whatever, and all horrible names, and like
Yeah.
Afghan. It was on and there was a program on television on it. I remember my buddies talking about it, and it was called Roots. And there was a guy in there that was a slave, and they called him Kunta Kinte, and they said, "Your name's Toby."
Yeah.
The amount of racism that came off the back of that, if you were mixed race or black, like, it was purgatory. It was really, really tough, really, really tough. But, everybody gets a tough time at some point in this world. Everybody gets a tough time. And it's how you deal with it. And these challenges that are given to us, they can be turned from adversities into benefit, which, you learn how to be, like tough as a result of it.
And yeah, and you and I are the same age, but like near almost to the day. We're
Yeah.
we're only like what a month apart, maybe. I think
Yeah.
6 weeks, maybe. So I think we're of the same generation, and I do actually remember. I mean, Roots was on TV in the U.S. It's like a mini series that was on TV. If probably some of the people listening have never even heard of it, but yeah, I remember. I remember the show. I remember Kunta Kinte and all that. Um, and I grew up in Memphis, which was probably at the time, but even back then, probably had a higher black population than most cities.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was I grew up in a very different kind of racial mix than even most people in the US, which was quite interesting as well. So, yeah, anyway,
Mm.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, and what was that? I mean, I know we talked about the fact that, you kind of had all of that and you had some struggles and stuff. And then as you got a little bit older, you ended up going into the military. So tell us about the military and what that
Um,
experience was like.
So, I mean, growing up, by the time I was 9 years old, I'd lived in 10 different houses. So that gives you an idea. Like we moved a lot, it was like we're moving. And we were, really poor, like really, really poor. And like racism was rife. It was just how it was at the time. Um, and
Was it harder every time you went to a new, were
we
you moving city to city or were you just moving kind of around the neighborhood that you were
w-
in?
no, we were moving in. I was changing schools. I mean, like I said,
Yeah.
by the time I was 10, I'd been to 5 different schools. So
Yeah.
we were moving schools to different
Okay.
places, and it was genuinely tough. And when you got to a new school, if you were the black kid, it was like, who's the nigger?
Yeah.
Here
I,
we go again. Let's play this one. And I was tough. Like
yeah.
most black kids are tough. I remember somebody saying to me once that, yeah, the reason black kids were tough is because, if you look at the islands, only the toughest slaves made it across, and it was only the best that were allowed to breed. So
Mm,
you're the super race. Somebody said that to me,
yeah.
and I thought, okay, it was sort of a backhanded comment, but we were tough.
It is a weird way to look at it, but if you look at things like sports in the US, some of the more physical sports you do tend to have a higher than average black population in those sports, and there must be something to that. I don't know if it's like I don't know, is it like pop science or something? I don't know if there's any science to back it up, but I know I've heard all that stuff as well.
Yeah, if you look at football in the UK, look at the
Yeah,
Premier League, most of the teams, at least 50% black people. It's
yeah,
just a fact. You know,
yeah.
and I'm the whitest black person ever because I know nothing about being black. So I wasn't brought up by any black parents. So I know nothing really about my race or culture. Nothing.
Well, that was something I did want to say to you, and I didn't say it the other day, but you don't really particularly present as being a typical black person as well. So, yeah, I guess like you were different enough that people knew that there was something different about you. But like I said, you're not. It's not like you have like a Nigerian who has really or a Ghanaian who has really really dark skin, and I know black people have various shades of skin and
Mhm.
all that sort of stuff. But again, you don't kind of typically have that presentation. So, but the kids still were able to pick up on the fact that there was something different.
Yeah, well, kids are really, really nasty, aren't they? And
Yeah, they're
you're gonna
horrible.
get, yeah. And I used to get it at home. My stepfather was a white guy, and he used
Right.
to beat me up and beat my mum up. I was in the children's home for a while. So as a kid, I wanted to be two things when I was older: rich and tough.
Yeah.
Tough so that I could kick
Yeah.
people's heads in if they started coming it. And I did that in the army. I got to be a boxing champion. And then rich, I made some money. I made a few million quid selling a financial services business that I built with no investment. So yeah, two things. Quite cool.
Yeah. 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 And I guess the other thing, and just going back, not to belabor the point, but because I moved around schools quite a lot, and at that age, kids are assholes. Even if you're white, right? They're still assholes, and it's difficult having to do that over and over and over again. And you go to a new neighborhood, and the kids don't know you, and then you just get shit again. And so all of that just kind of chipping away again probably gave you some resilience in your character. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I would definitely say it's true. I mean, I'm massively resilient and determined. And so, like, almost you turn up to the new place and you go, here we go again. Here we go again. Somebody's going to get it. And so you do develop a resilience to it. And, there's that thing, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I was the hardest kid in my year at school, when I was like 11 and, like I just had loads and loads of scraps and you get good at it if you're doing it, which I think's helped me in business
Mm.
genuinely because if you have a fight and you've got some fight in you, then you don't give up so easily.
So you leave school, you get a bit older, you go into the military, and again, I remember you said that you sort of excelled at the physical side of the military. Is that right?
Yeah, well, so when I was 16, I left school. I got a job in a shoe factory for a short space of time, a place called Myrick Moccasins. Didn't really like that. And then went straight into the army. Status Quo were playing In the Army Now. Do you remember that song? Oh, you're in the army now. I don't know if
Yeah,
you remember it. So
yeah, I have heard it. Yeah,
yeah, so I went in that. I went into the army, and the army was good because it was all about physical, and everybody was on the same level. and their motto is nobody gets left behind. You know, because obviously if you got shot on the battlefield, and if you thought somebody shot me, they're not going to leave you any bit behind. So it
Mm.
was good, and I got voted as the best recruit of physical training in training because I was really determined. I wasn't necessarily the best, but I was definitely the most determined, and and that was a good experience. And then I got to the battalion, and the racism started all over again. And I'm like, oh my god, here we go again. But then what you learn from these things. So I got into boxing, and I learned to box, and I became the best. I got voted the best boxer in the battalion. So that now I was genuinely really tough because boxing's about technique. It's like people say when I lose my temper, you lose your temper you like, man. I'm a boxing champion. You
Yeah.
better be brilliant. You know, like, because you've got some real skills in the same way that
Yeah.
in any sport, if you've got some real skills, and boxing's, it's a deadly sport. It's not like you can outwit a boxer; they'll just knock you out in a minute. You won't hit them, and then there'll only be two hits. They hit you, and you hit the ground. So I learned to do that, and I think that gave me a better self-image, which is really important in terms of
Mm.
success. How I thought about myself, and also supreme confidence that you know what that something had to stop, and the bullying and the racism and all that's that done. That's never happening again.
Yeah.
Mike Tyson called it. He said everybody's got a big mouth until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
And so if somebody knows they've got one of them coming, they're like, yeah, well, I won't say it to you. You ain't going to get it. So yeah.
And I imagine that was probably like, did you fight against it a lot, or did you just kind of roll with it? And I mean, the comments I mean, I'm sure you heard
No,
comments and all sorts of
I
shit. Did
never,
you?
I never ever let it go.
Right.
Ever, 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 ever. My grandmother used to say, and she was a little Scottish lady. Her name was Jane Reynolds, born on the um, 20th of December, 20th of September was her birthday. She used to say, tell the truth and shame the devil. And I just think we all know the score, right? And somebody's called you something, you can let it go if you want, or you can not. And I'm like,
Mm.
I was choosing. It was like, have you seen the Game of Thrones thing? And when they say to Cersei Lannister, you're going to get this, or you got violence, and she says, I choose violence.
Yeah.
Well, I was always picking violence. I'm like, you better be brilliant because I'm bringing it.
You chose violence. Okay. I and I was asked because what I was thinking is that probably by becoming the boxing champion and all that sort of stuff, you were able to develop a level of respect from people that probably you because they didn't know you, right? And so as you sort of developed that and you were the champion and whatever, then that probably helped overcome some of it.
Yeah.
And you were able to develop some respect. What was your job in the army?
I was just a soldier. I was just a normal soldier, which I didn't really like being a soldier, digging holes in the infantry,
Mm.
running around, the enemy's coming. I'm like, no, they're not. If they are, the Russians will be coming. We're in Germany for most of the time. I was in the army
Right.
in Northern Ireland for a bit, which there was lots of bombs going off in the 80s and people getting shot at and stuff. Um, but yeah, I was good in Northern Ireland as a soldier, but when there was nothing going on, it was, we used to call it days to do, right?
Right.
Because you'd look at when you were going to get out of the army, and like I left the army like my ass was on fire. I was like, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. Because you're getting told what to do again. I was like,
Yeah.
but it was a little bit like for me, university, what it would have been if you were forced into it. But it was a great experience. Taught me about leadership, um, because you've got people there that have been there and done that and shown you how they've done it. So the army is all about, they call it EDIP, explain, imitate, demonstrate, and practice. Everybody has to show you. It's not about telling you and writing things down on a piece of paper, and then all of a sudden, a week later, you've got 90% of what you learned. You actually had to demonstrate it, which that's a game changer in terms of learning, which helped me in my current business.
So how long were you in the army?
4 years and 93 days. Not that I was counting.
17 hours and 42
Now,
minutes.
I actually went in I came in, I joined when I was 16. It was just under 5 years. I joined when I was 16 and I left it. And I left it. I officially joined in the January, and then I finished on the 30th of April, 1990, my 21st birthday, which was great.
You're a young man. You're not a teenager anymore.
Yeah.
You've been in the army for several years. You've been a boxing champion. you've developed a bit of discipline. Maybe you're probably feeling pretty good coming out, and
Yeah.
then what do you do? What's your first day out of the military? And you start looking around, and were you just thinking, now what?
Yeah, well, I lived in Northamptonshire, and so the first thing was just get a job. Just get a job. I didn't care what job it was. And my friend's father worked in. Have you ever seen Dr. Martens airwear boots? The
Yeah.
boots with the yellow stitching. He worked there, and I said, "Get me a job." So I got a job in there as the head of packing and dispatch on 150 quid a week. It was like, and you know what? It was fun. The people in the factory, there's some really clever people in factories, like really, really clever, it's almost like the Hotel California. Once you've been there for a while, you can never leave. They
Yeah.
pay you just enough to stay, but nowhere near enough to want to stay. But and you get used to it. And so I was packing yellow stitch boxes and putting one box into another box and shipping them around the world. Um, and for a period of time, for a few months, it was all right. It was a job. It was better than the army because you finished, you got your wage, you get a girlfriend, you get a car. um, but do you remember the song Dirty Cash?
No, I don't know that one.
There's a song, Dirty Cash, I Want You, Dirty Cash, I Need You More. And My Prerogative, Bobby Brown, they were like the songs of the time. And I thought, I need to sort my shit out. I need to get a proper job. Um, and I think I applied for a job to be an estate agent. And the guy that interviewed me, he was a bit of a knob. He said to me, "Where do you reside?" And I just said, "Oh, I hang around with my mates at the windmill." I hadn't got a clue what he meant when he said reside. I didn't know what he meant. Anyway, I never got the job. But later on that year, I got a job as a financial advisor, believe it or not. And I mean,
Yeah.
and in 1990, if you could fog a mirror, you could get a job as a financial advisor,
Right.
self-employed on commission only. So I got a job as a financial advisor, and I couldn't believe that, you could just talk to people and get paid a load of cash rather than actually have to do work. And I felt like I'd discovered gold for the first time. I'm like, this is amazing, And then I started learning about skills that had utility. So I started learning about Socrates and philosophy, and I found it fascinating. 2,400 and whatever years ago, there was this old fellow walking around just asking questions, and he was like the foundation. And then it was the foundation of sales. And I found about positive mental attitude and negotiation. And when you start to learn those skills, you become more persuasive and influential, like really persuasive and influential. And I was a ferocious learner. And then at the time, there was a company called Nightingale Conan that used to do these cassettes that you could put in your car, audio cassettes, where you could listen to the best people that have ever lived, the most richest. And you know, if you think, imagine like we've lived this amazing life, David. Like we've got to 85, and you think you've got fag paper left, but you've made 10 billion, and you think, oh, we've got to give something back. You either write a book or you record an audio book, and those things exist, so you can go and learn from them. And I just discovered
Yeah.
this whole new world. And I'm dyslexic, so reading was like nah, but I'm listening to audiobooks, I'm thinking, this is amazing. Like, you could never get to these people, but all of a sudden you're learning from them. And every day I used to drive. I got a job as a mortgage advisor the following year, but I used to drive as a mortgage advisor from Kettering to Wellingborough, which was 20 minutes a day. And I'd put these audio cassettes in my car for the 20 minutes and the 20 minutes on the way home. And that would be like 40 minutes a day, 200 minutes a week, 800 minutes a month. And then if you did it, every month of the year, then all of a sudden you'd done 8,000 minutes if you only worked 10 minutes. And I thought, if somebody offered me a pill, this was my thoughts, with 8,000 minutes worth of learning, would I take it? And I thought, yeah, I'd probably take 3 of them. So every time I got in my car, I was listening to these cassettes, and it just changed my life.
Which is funny because that's kind of what podcasting, in a way,
Yeah,
has a lot of podcasts try to be that also, right?
yeah,
Which is why people listen. In fact, I used to listen to a management podcast on the way to work in the morning because I used to travel from
yeah,
West London into Central London every day. And it was the same thing. And I just put it in and I'd listen to them, and they had this whole show, and I learned tons and tons and tons about running effective teams and how to manage people and all
yeah,
sorts of stuff. I'm curious though to go back because you come out of the army, you're working at Doc Martens, you got a factory job, which is it's fine. We've all done factory jobs and stuff. Like that's good. It's good. You're earning money, whatever. It's a normal job. But something in you is you're like, I need to know more. And I assume that you start reading the classics and stuff just on your own, or did you have a mentor or someone who said you need to read these? Like how, because that seems like a big step. You've got a dyslexic kid who, moved around schools, you go in the army, you come out, and then you just start reading Plato. Like it seems weird. How did that happen?
What happened was I went out with this girl from Desborough. Her name was Lisa Fenwick, and her brother-in-law, a guy called Paul Iliff, took a shine to me because I had a little bit about me. I had the gift of the gab, and he said, "I think you'd be good at sales." And he gave me this book in a brown paper bag, and it was called "The Success System That Never Fails." And
Okay.
I was like, "Right, okay." And I thought, success system. I like the idea of systems because the army was a system, the shoe factory was a system. And then as I started reading the book, the first few pages of the book is about this little kid that goes into a cafe that gets thrown out and he goes back in, he gets thrown out, and he goes in again and is successful. And the guy builds a business called the Aon Corporation. It's worth $1 billion. He was brought up by a single parent, which I thought, God, I'd love to have been brought up by a single parent. My stepfather was a dickhead.
Yeah.
And he lived till he was 100. And I thought his book was amazing. And I remember sitting between the boxes in Dr. Martin's shoe factory, like October 1990. And Andy Mobbs, like big blonde head guy, 6'3", he was picking my boxes up and sticking the boxes as I sat there. And I sat there until my lunch break, and I read 63 pages in the first day, or 65 pages first day, and I've never read 65 pages of anything. And it was like 65 pages, forget it. It was never going to happen.
Yeah.
So I read 65 pages of The Success System That Never Fails. And when I read in the book, it talked about the most important ingredient for success was a positive mental attitude. And then sometimes when you get like people talk about earth shattering moments, right? And it gave the definition. And I thought, I looked around the factory and I looked at everybody and I thought, God, if I don't, it was like, and it talked about being the right mental attitude and having hope, faith, and integrity and having a can do, will try attitude. And I looked around and I could see like all the people in the factory. I thought, I could be doing this forever. Right. And like I thought I could, and I could see the world walking around in these yellow stitch boxes. I probably shipped them. And I thought, I could be doing this forever. And then at that moment, I thought, either I can do something and I will try, or I'll stay here forever. So that time I went to Paul, and when he gave me the book, he said, if you want me to get you an interview, I'll get you an interview. I went to the phone box with my 10p at the time that you had to put in the
Yep.
box. And I
Yep.
rang him and I said, I rang him in Desborough and I said, Paul, I want to come and see you. I want you to get me that job. And he said, okay, come over. And that was the game changer. It was actually taking action, and it talked about self-starters, having the right self-image. And that was the change. And so it was looking at my life and thinking, I could be doing this forever, and I have to do something different. And obviously at 21, I was quite brave. I'd been boxing, I've learned some new skills. I thought I can do it. And then what it made me reflect back on was, like, we were poor as kids. Like, I mean, we call it Brassic Park, Jurassic Park. We were Brassic Park. We were so skinny. It was unbelievable. I remember stealing potatoes with my father out of people's allotments, and because we never had any food a lot of the time. And then I remember, like, there was times when you could make money. I remember going carol singing, like going knocking on people's doors, like 8 years old, walking around Rothwell, going, Silent Night, or once in Royal David City, or away in a manger, and just doing that. So I'd almost given myself the thing that I'd been out and I'd gone and I'd spoken to people. I'd made titchy little bits of money. I remember getting a Starsky and Hutch jacket, saving up a five, and then going to Market Harbour with my mum on the bus to get this jacket that I'd saved up for at like 8 years old. So I thought, something just spoke to me. It resonated, and I thought, I could do this. I genuinely felt like for the first time in my life I could do it. And then later on in October that year, I was sat in the station hotel in Derby. There was a train station hotel, and I sat there and I was learning about Socrates. And I thought, this is the thing I will do for the rest of my life. And I knew I knew I'd be a salesperson. I knew I'd spend the rest of my life in sales. And I guess the thing that I did that most people didn't do to be successful, was I studied everything that sat behind sales: pitching, framing, negotiating, neurolinguistic programming, from the best people in the world. And then I became the top financial advisor in the UK, which was, it made a difference.
You're the top performing financial advisor. Are you happy? Does the money make you happy?
it gives you choices, but I've always one of my friends, a guy called Phil, right? I'll never forget him. He's a bouncer on the door of a pub in town, right? And he we were in, and there was this little girl come and stood next to me. Phil's beautiful looking, 6'4", massive, blonde, like mega looking. And this little girl come and stood next to us, who was like stunning, like 9 out of 10, stunning. And I said to Phil, I said, she likes you, and he went, nah, mate, nah, she don't. She wants Ferrari Dave, because obviously I'd got Ferrari and stuff like that. And what do you mean?
Right.
He said she wants the old BBD, and I was like, BBD, what do you mean? He went, bigger, better deal. He said, she wants to be. I said, I'm married, I've got a missus. And he said, she don't care. She thinks you can take her on. So I've always wanted, whatever I've had, I've always wanted the next thing, and always been hugely ambitious. So, and it's been constant, it's a little bit like if you look at the great football managers, whether it's Pep Guardiola, current day, or Sir Alex Ferguson, or, the Liverpool great managers, or Jock Stein, they just want to win and win and win and win and win and win and win. And that's what I'm like. I'm just like, whatever I've done, it's like next and on to the next one. That's just what drives me, which is mad, because you're thinking you should be happy, but I'm like, no, next.
Yeah. So there's kind of an insatiable drive just for the next thing.
Yeah, always.
What's your drive today?
Right now, I'm back working with it. Back in the day, if I go back to 2005, I found a genius called Callum, and we reversed Google's algorithm. We were number one in the world for all of the major insurance terms: life insurance, house insurance, home insurance, like health insurance, like whatever, and all those things. And we were making like profits, a couple of $100,000 a month for me, probably 400, but I was spending 200 on shit that didn't need to.
Right.
And now I'm focused on the LLM optimization with Callum, so we can get all the traffic, so we can get the recurring revenue, so we can do whatever. So that's my big focus in terms of change. And also the NEET problem in the UK, the not in education, training, or employment. There's a million kids that are
Yeah.
NEET, and to me, all they need is to be they need to be taught how to reframe their self-image, to have the right mental attitude, and to have the communication skills. Because if somebody teaches them how to have that, they'll get themselves a ticket, and all they need is a ticket, because they've got that determination and resilience. So they're my two projects at the moment that I'm working on. How do we reverse Google's algorithm, and then how do we do something significant on NEET?
We'll steer away from the whole AI conversation because we could go down a massive rabbit hole there,
Mhm.
and how that's changing and upending that
Yeah.
whole part of the industry. Um, I'm interested though in maybe exploring the NEET idea, because I know, as you know, I have a 19-year-old son.
Yeah.
So, he's recently out of, doing his A levels. He's taking a gap year. Wasn't really sure, fewer, I think only 40% of the kids in his school went on to uni
Yep.
or are planning on going to uni. The rest of them are I think a handful have jobs. Um, like I would say a proper job,
Mm.
right? My son has a job and he works and he does video editing, but that's freelance. It's
Yep.
when I say a proper job, I mean like going into an office every day on a salary or something like that, right?
Mhm.
Like, or working at McDonald's where you're doing shift, like a
Yeah.
job like that. Like he does freelance work, kind of creative, which it is a job, but it's different,
Yeah.
I think. And only a few of his mates have jobs like that, like proper jobs. And I I don't know, I don't see much. None of them seem to have any drive. None of them seem to, take the initiative for anything. And for me personally, that's the thing that I have taught him. He has had jobs working in pubs and stuff. And I said to him, look, when he started his very first shift, I said, the only thing you need to focus on is being proactive.
Mhm.
Do not stand around and just look around like you don't know what's going on. I'm like, if nothing else, pick up a rag and go wipe a table down.
Mhm.
I'm like, just do not do nothing, right? Like, just, or go ask, what can I do now? What can I do now? What can I
Mhm.
do now? And I said, that will set you apart. And the funny bit is I knew the lady that he was, oh, I almost spilled my drink. I knew the lady that he was working for. And after he worked his shift, I came to pick him up. And I saw her and I said, oh, how's it going? She's got, oh my God, I love him. And I went, really? She's like, he's amazing. He just cleans the table, so I don't have to ask him. And I was like, yeah, I've worked in a restaurant before. I know that deal. And but but even doing that little thing, do you know what I mean? Set him apart from everybody else. She absolutely loved him.
Mhm.
Um, and that's the one thing I don't see in kids today. And so, how do you think we can address that issue? Is like, how do we do that as a society?
Well, to me, the biggest problem is if you look at today, the kids are born digital. They're born with a a cell phone in their hand. From the and there's if you look at them at night, their faces are glowing up in these screens. And I've got four kids, so I can tell you now. I've seen it and been part of that. You know, play. Um, I don't think you're going to change them. We need to meet them where they're at, but then they need some additional skills. Like working hard is a learned skill. Like
Mm,
it's a learned skill, same as the communication skills. But you're not going to get it coming out of a school as things stand right now. I'm going to a big school tomorrow in Bristol. Um, we need to recognise, and also they're going to want more than working behind a bar. It's going to want a better job than working behind a bar. But we need to give them the ability to be able to get better jobs. And it's going to be the shiny penny in the barrel that gets the one that gets picked out. So how do you make them stand out? And ultimately, if you're going to run a business, you can get AI to do bits of it, but you're going to need people. We're going to need people. Businesses need people. And for every business that's not doing well, there'll be businesses that are doing well. And the ones that are the best communicators will tend to get the job because you'll like them more, because they're more eloquent in the way they speak. They'll be able to do what your son was doing that woman a favor by cleaning the tables. That's reciprocity, and it's showing that he's going the extra mile. But if we don't teach these skills digitally and meet them where they're at, what's going to happen is we're going to keep leaving people behind. And so at some point, like it has to stop. It has to stop this fast that everybody can just go on and get a PIP payment and just sit there. That has to stop, and it will either stop in one or two ways: either there'll be some kind of crisis, or alternatively, like it just won't be sustainable. And so as it is at the minute, it should stop. But kids don't want to be sat at home in their bedrooms looking at screens. They want to work. They want to do things, but it's going to take a different breed and a different system to educate those kids in a better way with the right things that they're going to want to engage with.
how do you think we got where we are now?
Um, it's leadership in any business that takes you where you are right now. I mean, if you look at the last, like God knows how many prime ministers, how many of those kids, if we went to school, right? If somebody said to you, Boris is in charge, you know, like you couldn't make it up. Teresa's in charge. You go, Liz is in charge. Then Rush is in charge. They're not proper leaders in real terms. So we're putting the wrong people in charge of the country. And then you look at the, there's a thing called the European Human Rights Act. If you read that European Human Rights, it's written incredibly fair for both sides. But you've got Lord Humour or whatever that's judging and saying no, we can't throw these people out or do these things, and reading it from a negative perspective rather than a positive perspective. So the lawyers are currently running the country. So it needs change, and change is obviously always constant. It's ongoing, and it will change. It has to change. Have to, because you can't sustain what we're doing right now. But we got there with poor leadership, really, really, really poor leadership, and and if the route to like becoming a politician or leading the country is the way that it's always been, we're going to keep getting what we've always got. We need something different. We need a different, narrative and different story. And so, hopefully we'll get that coming along. But I mean, what you can see now is the Reform Party, in reality, off the back of nobody else is really electable, are making themselves saying we need to change. Now, they're probably not very good at what they're doing, but it is what it is. It is what it is.
Hmm.
I mean, if you really look at how we got to where we got to now, it was because Theresa May called a general election when she had a majority. If she hadn't have done that, Labour, what's it called? Labour would have been in power through the COVID years, probably have screwed it up. And then you'd have had the different politics. You'd had Conservatives in right now doing something and blaming Labour for what was wrong. But I don't know. I don't think, they're two cheeks of the same arse in real terms, and none of
Yeah,
them are any good.
they're always going to blame each other, right?
You
Like
know?
that's just that's what they do. I was more thinking like because when you and I grew up, the world obviously was a different place, right? Like
Yeah,
we have
yeah.
to take that. But how did we get to the point? Because I don't remember anybody not being kind of. I mean, of course, there's always people that aren't motivated, right? But by and large, pretty much everybody that I went to school with, we all went to university. We like everybody wanted to make something of themselves. They all wanted to do something. And I think the world feels like a very different place, and it feels like we've kind of lost our way, and the kids have lost their way a bit. Do you have any theories on how you think that happened? Because that's not Theresa
There's a
May.
lack of
That's
skills, though. It's a skills
you
gap
know,
in real terms. If you look at it, it's a skills gap. Some of the skills that we had, the resilient skills, the
mm,
communication skills, like, for me, I learned a lot from going into pubs and clubs, like loads. I learned about winning and losing, about people getting drunk, about violence, about whatever. Now, a lot of that stuff's been taken away and it's been replaced with a mobile phone. And we give,
mm,
I mean, if you think about it today, right, a kid's born, you give them access to the world's information. And then when they get to 20 or 19 or whatever, you say, now be normal. We don't even know what their heads are wired like. No one's ever done this before. And you go,
yeah.
now be normal. What, hold on a minute. I'd like to see what you would have been like, mate, if you'd lived their lives. And so we can't blame the people. What we've got to do is we've got to make sure that we meet people where they are and give them a better education. And also, I, normally, right, when things are tough like they are right now, there's big infrastructure projects. If you look at Germany, how it recovered after the Second World War, we should have some big infrastructure projects going on. The waterways are still terrible. The policing service is still terrible.
They
Like,
had a lot of building to do.
yeah, but we have as well. There's loads to be done now. The roads are still
Yeah,
terrible. So we should have some
yeah.
big infrastructure projects going on where
Well,
we,
we do. We've got the new Thames Crossing thing, that the project that they're working on, and I know in Kent, I'm down in Kent, and I was talking to someone who works in the trades. I think he's a plumber or something, but he was saying that they have a whole office set up, and it's like literally they're begging people to come in and to get jobs, and they're like, "We will train you. We will teach you everything. We need laborers, we need, bricklayers, we need everything." And
yeah,
they're just like, literally, if a young person shows up and says, "I want a job," they basically will go, "Can you fog a mirror?" And if they say yes, they're like, "Fine, we'll put you in and we'll train you." And they're
yeah,
absolutely desperate for people. And again, I said to my son, I'm like, "Mate, if I were you and had an opportunity to do that, I would probably go and do it, because that's
yeah,
like a job for like 10 years
yeah.
working on a massive, massive
Yeah,
infrastructure
and you could
project."
earn good money, and everybody wants to be
Yeah,
digital leaders. But what we need to do, though, is get people telling stories and making it more visual about, I was talking to Karen, who does all of our accounts. She's a brilliant lady. And she was saying that when she has a welder come to her place, how much do you think they charge her for an hour? 1 hour,
150 quid.
300 quid.
Yeah. Okay. There you
Right,
go.
so you
Yeah.
do 2 hours work a
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
knock it on, yeah.
Yeah. I know. I know.
So you look at that and you go, can you get a couple of hours a day? And okay, it's specialist and whatever, but there are really good jobs, but the communication's not out there to the kids so they understand, and we're not meeting people where they're at. I don't think there's any, they're no less capable than what we are today, but our communication and
Mm.
leadership, the wrong people are telling people they're wrong, they're broken, they're whatever, and we're not creating the on ramp and the communication skills to get people in place. It's missing. And we're blaming the kids. I mean, ultimately, the minute I start blaming you, I remember having a business, and things went wrong in the business when we lost all of our rankings. And I remember thinking that, there was heroes and bums. She was useless. He was crap. This was whatever. Right. But I was paying these people. I was paying them. So I was the idiot, because what I should have done is worked with them and helped them become better. And then when you work out how to do that, you have a better business. But too many times we blame people rather than work with them and realize that this is our life. We're going through it together. We should work together as a team and help people rather than blaming them for what they're not good at.
Mm. Yeah, I was listening to Alex Hormozy
Mhm.
the other day, and he was answering questions to people in the audience, and there was a lady who was asking about her team and how she could motivate them and, get them to be, want, basically to be involved in the business. And his answer was, you can't. Like, if they're not that type of person, it's a waste of time. You need to just get rid of them and get somebody who is interested. And it's a pain and it's difficult, but as a business owner, that's how you build a good, strong team, is that you get people that are interested.
I disagree.
And I mean, my theory is, and this is good, we could talk about this, but my theory is that you hire for fit and you train for skill, because it, you can train anybody, but the thing is, it's how much effort and how much time and everything does it take to train an attitude versus a skill. And I want the people with the right attitude, because if I get the right people with the right attitude that fit in with the team's attitude and how we feel, training for skill is easy, because the people that I get will be interested in going, oh, okay, I need to figure out how to do this so that I can do it well.
I disagree.
Um, but go on
I,
then.
I disagree, right? So
So you think it's easier to train for attitude than it is for skill?
I think everything should be trained for, because ultimately somebody gives you a human being and you can train and shape and do what you want. If you get them as a baby, they can do amazing things.
Yeah.
So 2008, we lost all of our Google rankings, all of them. And then we lost our staff because we were running a financial services business and we were getting all these lovely leads coming in from Google. And then next thing you know, the leads are gone. And then I have to start buying some data lists where somebody had inquired about buying some protection on a thing. And I'm like, and it was like, you know, when you go to a zoo and you got zoo lions and then you got wild lions from the savannah. I'm going, mine were all zoo lions. I'm going, do you want a bit of giraffe? And they're going, oh no, I'm full up today. But, you know, wait for the thing to come around. If there's some buffalo, I'd really like buffalo today. Right. So I was giving them all those lovely leads. And what I needed was wild lions from the savannah. Right.
Yeah.
That was what was required. And so you look and you go, okay, whose fault was it? Was it their fault? Was it my fault? Anyway, they all started leaving when I'm giving them these leads that are not, you know, like you're breaking your teeth on rocks. They're harder leads to close. And so some of them start leaving and you learn from that. And then you start realizing that, you know, we're in Wellingborough in Northamptonshire, where the gene pool wasn't like where you've got a big university like an Oxford or a Cambridge. It was a normal town, normal place, normal people like me. And then you go, well, what is the right mental attitude, right? And so you have to define that. A positive mental attitude is the right mental attitude in any given set of circumstances, incorporating the plus traits of life. Words such as hope, faith, and integrity. PMA equals can do, will try. Now, if you make people turn that into images and then teach you back from those images, they learn it twice. They learn what the image is and they learn what the words are. It stops the decay. They've not forgotten it within a week. And then all of a sudden, when you're talking about attitude, we're talking about the same thing, right? Now, if somebody wants to elect out because they can't act in a way consistent with an attitude that's been defined, that people know what it is and everybody knows what it is, then you can see who wants to throw their job away. But too many times we tell somebody that they need to have the right attitude, but we don't define what it is. And Seneca said a consciousness of wrongdoing is the first step towards salvation, right? You have to define what it is before you can say whether somebody has or hasn't got it. And I'll tell you now, I've taken kids that, you know, people said got the wrong mental attitude and whatever, and you work with them because our gene pool wasn't the Oxford Cambridge gene pool. And all of a sudden you got some of the top financial advisors in the country because you meet people where they're at and you train them as to what it's like. And one of the best stories for this is when somebody gets a job at Ritz-Carlton, they put that brown uniform on, and the first thing they say is, we're ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. You have to go there, and there's a code as to how you behave, right? But when you bring people into a business, often we haven't got the systems and the processes to tell people how they should behave. And when they start acting how they would naturally act, we act disappointed. And it's not because they're good or bad people. It's because we're not good enough in terms of our business. You know, too many times with sales, like, which is my background, we blame people. We say he's useless, he's crap, but we've not taught them the competencies they're required to be amazing at sales. We don't teach them how to pitch, frame, negotiate, how influence works. When we do, all of a sudden they're significantly better. But instead, what we do is we blame these people and we say he's useless or she's crap. But it's because our systems and processes aren't good enough in our businesses. And that's where you can take ordinary people and make them extraordinary. And that's when you got an extraordinary business.
I mean, I think, yeah, it feels like we're kind of saying the same thing in different
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
You're using much better words than me. And that's okay. Interesting. Yeah. I don't know. I kind of feel like at some point along the way, I feel like parents like just handed off all of their responsibility for raising their kids to like someone else.
Yeah.
Like whether it's this, like, I don't know who they think is supposed to do all this stuff, but you know, my view of my job as a parent is it's my job to teach my son all this stuff, right? That's a parent's job. is we're supposed to teach our kids how to do those things and how to, you know, try to have a positive mental attitude when you're approaching challenges and all this sort, like that's what we're supposed to do.
Yep.
But at some point it feels like, and I don't know when it was, but it wasn't in the last 5 years. This is something that's happened 20 years ago or
Yeah.
25 or 30 years ago. Like there was like this whole idea that parents just went, oh no, that's like someone else, the school's job or whatever. And like you even to schools now and they've got like kids who come to school who aren't even potty trained. And like the parents are like, oh, but that's what school's supposed to teach them. It's like, oh my God. And so I blame the breakdown of society on parents. And I don't know. And again, I don't know exactly when it happened. And I don't know if there was some sort of weird societal thing that happened. And it's in the US, it's over here. It's like, it's not, you know, it's certainly in the West. I can't really speak for other kind of big cultures like the Middle East or the Far East or, you know, like South and Central America, but certainly sort of the West
Hmm.
in quotes. It seems like that kind of happened, and I just don't know when that was and how we get back from that. But for me, it feels like we've got to get back to that point where we've got parents taking responsibility for teaching those lessons to our kids. And it's going to be on people like you, frankly, to lead the charge to teach the parents what to actually teach the kids because we've got to a point where I don't think the parents even know what they should be teaching even if they were inclined to do so.
But we're
I don't
living.
know,
Yeah,
I
no,
judge it
I
pretty
agree with you.
harshly, but
I agree with you. I mean, we're living in the most connected time in all of human history, and I agree with you with regards to potty training. There's social psychology, the science behind how we can do this, but ultimately, it's about leadership and it's about having the will. Um, and then saying, okay, what's the goal? You know, what's the outcome, and what actions can we take to do it? This is a closable gap in terms of if somebody handed you a problem, and they said, look, you're terminally ill, you're going to be dead, whatever, within a fortnight, or you have to solve this problem and make parents better. I'll take the parents better one all day long,
yeah.
in terms of contrast. So it's we can make it better, but everybody needs to be brought in and work together as a team. And there's got to be more trust and communication and put in place. And it's leadership, yeah. And you look at like different countries around the world that are solving these problems. This has been done before. This can be done, but it takes unity and leadership. And at the minute, it's all about division and saying you can't do this and this is wrong and here's where it is, rather than actually having a positive mental attitude and actually having that can do, will try approach to it. I mean, if you think about countries, right? Um, we live on one of the best rocks in the world. There's no natural disasters, right? We've got our infrastructure in place. We've got a police force in place. All the roads are in place. We've got an NHS in place. In other places, they've got natural disasters. The food's not there. Well, we've got a lot. This is a really good rock. And so you look and you think, okay, and we've got 4 trillion in GDP that we collect. And so, but we need to work out how to do things better. And it's leadership that's going to change that. And it's about everybody being unified around having a long-term goal. The way we elect our politicians, they're in for 4 years. They do what they want for the first 2, then they lie for the next 2 and try and make it nice so they get back in again. There's no long-term planning there in real terms. So the
Yeah.
system is broken. The way that we lead is broken. And then ultimately, when we shut down big communities like Port Talbot, there was the young kids that were committing suicide and that there, you think we're going to shut down this mine, but you're going to close a community down for generations to come. It's not all about making money. Some of it's about making sure that we've got long-term planning in place for building that community and making sure that we get these places right so they don't look like run-down towns. That shouldn't be the case. And in order to get
Mhm.
that to happen, we need to start off with a pain and a project. And like the NEAT for me is one of the pains and the projects, because I think we've got some of the most well-educated kids in the world that are misunderstood and they're not being educated in the right skills to get them jobs. And some of the jobs that you've spoken about, whether it's working on a building site, if it was sold in the right way and kids understood it and it was explained in the right way, I think we would close the gap significantly from where we are from 1 million to start bringing it down. And then ultimately it's going to take cleverer people than me. It's going to take a team of really clever people to work together. And so, okay, we've got a digital skills gap. Some people are going to want to go into digital skills, some into construction, some big infrastructure projects. And then all of a sudden, we can start getting on the right side of the road. And when you get momentum and success, then it continues.
I think there are some green shoots thinking about that. Like, certainly a lot of kids are starting to look at trades and stuff again,
Yep.
which is really good. And like I said, we've encouraged my son to look at that as an option,
Yep.
of something that he may want to do. And I think also for a long time there was general society had sort of got to this point where I again, and this is something that you and I experienced as we were growing up. I think when we were very young, not everybody went to uni, right? Only the very smartest, brightest, richest people went to uni.
Yep.
Or if you wanted to be a doctor or an engineer or something like that, like you had to be extremely smart and whatever already to get
Yep.
accepted into university. And then we got in this period where they started doing, governments wanted this big push. It's like all the kids need to go to university. Everybody needs to be educated. We're going to throw loads of money at it. They introduced school loans, these student loans, which had a massive impact on the affordability for students to be able to go to uni. And then all of a sudden, the universities realized that they could make tons of money because all the kids had these loans now. So the universities just started taking anyone because it meant that they got more money.
You got a
And
degree in David Beckham, couldn't you?
yeah,
David
so
Beckham studies, you like.
yeah, so but then what you ended up with ultimately now is we've got a society where everybody has a degree, so the degree doesn't mean anything anymore. And now all the kids are looking at it and they're going, well, the degree doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean I'm going to get a job. I can have a master's degree and I'm still working at McDonald's. What's the point of getting in all this debt to go to university when it's not even going to matter? Because I don't want to be a doctor. I don't want to be an
Yep.
engineer. So now they're looking at other options and they're kind of looking around and going, well, actually, if I train to be a plumber, I'm making 80 pounds an hour, like straight away as a junior, right? And not only am I making money, but I'm getting my training so that when I'm done
Yep.
and I'm fully qualified, then I can go off and I can sort of work on my own.
Yep.
And there's all these old boys that have been doing this for decades and they want to quit. The
Yep.
plumber who used to come and service our central heater basically would come out and he would say, I can't retire. He's like, I've got all these customers and I don't have anyone to give my, he's like, I would give my business to someone.
Yep.
He's like, I wouldn't even sell it. I just give them the business if I had somebody to give it to. And he's like, I can't even find anyone that wants to do it.
Mhm.
And he's like, there's so much opportunity out there. But we got to this point in society, I think, where everybody looked down on those jobs. They're all like, no, you need to go to university. You don't want to be a plumber. That's, they're thick. They don't know. They haven't been to school. And that, we went through this phase that I think we're coming out of. So, maybe there's a little bit of hope on the horizon from that where, society in general has started to look at it and say to the kids, actually, that is an okay thing to do. And
Yep.
you can still be respected as a person and be a plumber, as opposed to everybody looking at you going, well, you're just fucking thick. And you had to be a plumber because you couldn't go to uni. And it's like, I make more than anybody that's been to uni.
Going to uni, I mean, ultimately, that's not a bar now. It's just one of those things you
Yeah.
go. I told my son to go to uni, so he didn't grow up too soon. That was why I told him. I said, go to
Mm,
uni. You don't grow up too soon. My daughter's she's just finished school now. She's 18, in a couple of months. She's not going to uni. My other daughter went to uni. None of them that she's not used the degree in any way.
yeah.
I think it was a good experience for her. Um, just because I didn't want them to grow up too soon. But that was it. Because life comes at you, and then it doesn't stop.
Yeah,
I could
that's true.
never have gone to uni, like ever in a million years. I'm dyslexic. I'd had more
Yeah.
chance of being getting in at NASA than at a uni.
I don't know. I think you do all right. You seem to apply yourself pretty well and
Yeah, now I do.
make the effort.
Yeah, I could do it now.
So if you had some advice for anybody listening,
Hmm.
I mean, this is life by misadventure, and obviously you've had challenges throughout your life. But what's your biggest piece of advice? I think if you were going to leave with somebody, about whatever you like, life and the state of the world. I don't know in general.
one of the biggest things that I've learned in my life is if you can get people to give you a chance, you can be persuasive and influential. You can get people to give you a chance, right? Then you'll get to the front of the queue, right? Because it's going to be the person they like the most that's the most persuasive and influential. So learning about, my company's called Suada. Suada's the goddess of persuasion. Um, you know, drop me an email. I'll give you something to learn that'll be useful to you. Suada's Suada. Um, but I'll give you something that'll be useful to you. There's tons of books, audio books, cassettes. We've got programs, but that's the killer. It just makes a difference when you can persuade and you can be influential. Then it makes everything of the different, all of the difference. You can have you can have all the knowledge inside of you, but if you can't talk to somebody and explain it in a way that and frame it in a way that people buy into you and they believe in you, you've got no chance. You might as well not have it. You might as well be a tree.
Mm. Cool. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah,
Good
that's it.
conversation.
So, yeah. So anyway, drop me a note, david@swada.com, and I'll give you something if you want to learn something as a
I was
result.
going to say, how do people get in touch with you? So
Yeah,
you've done it. So that's
yeah,
brilliant.
yeah. So suada.com, David.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dave.
Brilliant. Cheers, brother.